the end of this seminar, participants will be able to, one, understand the concept of the stress spend cycle. Two, identify psychological triggers behind these stress-related spending behaviors. Number three, recognize the financial and emotional consequences of the cycle. Number four, explore evidence-based strategies to break the cycle. And lastly, we'll also learn practical tools to promote mental well-being and financial resilience. So let's start with the first part, which is definition of the keywords. And for this topic, we'll be picking just two keywords there, which sums up what we are going to talk about. We'll talk about the stress, and then we'll talk about mental well-being. Stress and mental well-being. So what is stress? Mental stress is a combination of cognitive, emotional, and behavioral reactions to life challenges. When you talk about cognitive, you're talking about thinking. When you talk about emotional, you are referring to feelings. And then when you talk about behavioral, we are talking about acting. So we are putting all of this together, a combination of thinking, feeling, and acting towards life challenges. Now, we can also say that there are two types of stresses. We have the short-term stress, which can be adaptive. Like when you are doing exercises, you are going through stress, you can adapt to it. While the second part is the chronic stress, which can lead to physical and mental harm. Stress can spread socially and also affect communities and families. Of course, when we look at ourselves, whenever we are stressed, we know that there's a way we react in the environment. When you have your friends around you, they see the stress written all over you, you have your children, definitely people around you will always know that you are being stressed. So stress can spread socially and can affect communities and family. Let's talk about the physiological impact of stress. Stress increases heart rate, blood pressure, and activates cortisol production. Chronic stress causes inflammation and impairs the cognitive functions, including decision making. Remember when we defined the mental stress, I said cognitive means what? Thinking. So when you have chronic stress, it causes inflammation and impairs your ability to think properly, which includes decision making. And when this is affected, it is linked to anxiety, it is linked to depression, and also what? And also burnout. We'll go to the second part, which talks about mental well-being. The second keyword we are trying to define to get a base of what we want to talk about. Mental well-being. When you talk about mental well-being, this refers to a state of mind where a person is able to cope with the normal stress of life. When you say somebody is mentally stable, that means that person can cope with all forms of stresses coming from all forms of life. That person can work productively, that person can enjoy positive relationship, and also feel a sense of purpose or fulfillment, as the case may be. When you talk about mental well-being, it is not just the absence of mental illness. No, it is the presence of positive mental states and emotional health. Or we can just put mental stress in a simple term, that it's about feeling good and functioning well, mentally, emotionally, and socially. So when you want to describe somebody as being mentally stable, you need to look at these functions properly. Is this person mentally, emotionally, and socially stable? Is this person feeling good about himself or herself? Then we'll talk about the psychology behind mental well-being. Stress impairs self-control and decision making. We've already talked about it. Spending can release dopamine. And what is dopamine? Dopamine is a chemical messenger, like an hormone, that transmits signals to the brain and other parts of the body. Now, how you feel at that particular time depends on the quantity of your what? Of this dopamine that is being released to the brain. So when you have too much of this dopamine, it leads to what we call schizophrenia, which is like a mental illness. And then when you have too low of this dopamine in the brain, it leads to what we call depression. So the high or the low of dopamine released into our system gives us our present mood at that particular time. So we can say dopamine creates like a brief high that marks emotional pain. The role of dopamine is to give instant gratification at that particular time. Emotional spending as a coping mechanism. We often look for fast solutions when we feel overwhelmed. When you are choked, when you're overwhelmed, you look for things to do immediately to change that situation around it, which may not necessarily be a lasting solution to what you are going through. How to support mental well-being? You have what? You practice mindfulness or meditation. You get regular physical activity. You maintain healthy relationship. Sleep well and eat a balanced diet. Limit stress and ask for help when needed. And then you can also seek professional support if feeling overwhelmed. Now, the key aspect of mental well-being. When you talk about emotional balance, which is the first one, when you talk about emotional balance, you're talking about feeling calm, you are content, and you are able to manage emotions like anger, sadness, or anxiety. That is when you can say you are emotionally balanced. When you are able to manage the different waves of emotions that are coming in. It can be anger, it can be sadness, it can be anxiety, it can be joy, whatever it is that is coded in the emotion. When you are able to manage it appropriately, then we say that person is what? Emotionally balanced. The second one is resilience. That is the ability to bounce back from adversity or stress. Your ability to adapt. And then in the process of you adapting to that situation, you are able to come out of it. And then from that adversity or the stress. Number 3 is talking about self-acceptance. First thing first is you feeling good about who you are. Even with your flaws, even with your imperfections, just look at yourself and appreciate yourself first. There's a saying that no one will make you happy except you make yourself happy, which means your happiness does not lie in anybody. Your happiness does not stay in anybody's hearts or in anybody's home. You make yourself happy first, and then before other people can add that happiness to it. Number 4, we have positive relationships. Having strong social connections and a sense of belonging goes a long way to give us a positive relationship. Number 5, we have purpose and meaning. Feeling that life has direction and that you as human can contribute something meaningful. When you know that your life has a purpose, your life has a meaning, then these are part of the things that will make you to be mentally stable. And lastly, we have the productive functioning, being able to concentrate, make decisions, and manage responsibilities. Now let's go to the second part, which is what is the stress spend cycle. When we talk about the stress spend cycle, we are saying that it is like a behavioral loop where an individual spend money impulsively in response to stress, which produce short-term relief. I want us to key into that word, short-term reliefs, but leads to financial strain and creating more stress. Or we can also define it as a pattern where individuals respond to stress through spending, which in turn can worsen financial and emotional strain. This cycle is when you spend to feel better under stress, but end up feeling worse. Now, recognizing it is the first step to breaking it. When we get to that point, which is the third part, we'll talk about how we can break this cycle. Recognizing it is the first step to breaking it. While it may offer temporary comfort, this stress spending, it often leads to regret, financial strain, and eventually more stress. And then when we talk about something as a cycle does not have a beginning, doesn't have an end. And so looking at what we have on our screen, we have the stress triggers, leads to you spending. And then after spending, you now have the guilt. You have recovered from the spending, you now have the guilt. Or by spending, you've not incurred more debt, and then you now go back to more, to what? To more stress. So firstly, let us identify what are these stress triggers. What are those things that trigger this stress in us that will make us to spend, which is the stress spend, and then at the end of it, we'll feel guilty, and eventually we will now come back to where we started from, the stress. Example is exams. We have work pressure. You have relationship issues. You have financial anxiety, health issues. You are bored. You are sad. You are lonely. Anger, fatigue. Peer comparison, social media influence, and all that. These are some of the stress triggers that we have that can actually lead us into stress spending that we may eventually regret at the end of the day. Now, let's look at some practical and relatable examples for students. Since this is a student forum, let's look at some things that is relatable that we can link to what we call this stress spend. The first one is exams are approaching. And of course, as students, you're already overwhelmed with study pressure. You ask yourself, oh, will I be able to do it? Will I be able to do that? And then you've been reading, but somehow the thing is just not entering the head. And then the next thing you do is you drop your books, and then you carry your phone. And while you're on your phone, you start scrolling through, you start seeing different apps, you start seeing, you go to Temu, you go to Jumia, you go to, all of these shopping apps. And then little by little, you start buying. You buy clothes, and for the men, they look at the latest PS5. For the ladies, they look at, oh, this is the latest jewelry, this is the latest bag, the latest clothes, and all that. That is emotion. That is what? That is a spending behavior. A spending behavior. Buying things, to feel in control or to get quick comfort over it. And then at the end of it, after the whole shopping, the whole scrolling all through the social media, there's a temporary relief. You feel good for that short period of time for spending. You give yourself a quick mood boost. Like, oh, at least I'm able to do this within 30 minutes, 1 hour. You're able to shop, you're able to order online and all that. But the consequences that later you feel guilty for not only wasting money, but also wasting your time. And then the stress increases. Remember that the stress trigger was what? Your forthcoming exams. And now the exams are approaching. You've not even read, you've not covered up. And now you have also incurred more debt. So you are now behind on studying, and you are also short on cash. That is a relatable example for students. Another one we can look at is when you have a bad day. You are bombarded with quiz, or you just enter into class and real teachers are fond of that. You can just feel like, oh, today, let me just stress this student small. And then you just enter the class. You tear a piece of paper, write your name, your matric number, your reg number, depending on what you use in your school. And then say, question 1. At that point, you are stressed. The dopamine is being released into your brain, and you're asking yourself, oh, what is this? There is this impromptu decision you need to make at that point in time. And then after you know that you are done with this impromptu exams or tests or quiz or group project, as the case may be, and then instead of you going home to cook because you're already fatigued, you're tired, instead of you going home to cook, you decide to order. You now open your bag or your phone, you now look, oh, instead of me going home to cook, let me just, order this food and eat. Now, at that point, when the food arrived and you are eating, you are feeling better, you are okay with yourself. But at the end of the day, what happens? Your test score or the quiz is still waiting for you, showing that you have failed. And then on the second hand, you have also overspent your food budget. I can go on and on and on and on. Another example I can also pinpoint is when you see your friends posting about outfits, about their latest, their latest equipment that they bought, maybe phone, maybe, ring lights, anything, that you people use now. And then you now ask yourself, oh, what is happening to me? You're feeling left out. Okay, let me also get this. This is the latest jersey. This is the latest phone. This is the latest iPhone. This is the latest AirPod. And all that you also get for yourself. And then at that point in time, after you've purchased all of these things that you have seen with your friends or seen even on social media, you feel you've belonged and you have something to show off to. But the consequences eventually is what? The excitement fades. You realize you don't even need all these items in the first place. And now you can't even afford something more important, maybe your books or even to pay your bills. So you can see that when you have the stress trigger, you go into emotional spending. And then while you're making that spending, you are at that point, you're emotionally relieved. But it is temporarily. And then the consequences is you either incur more debt, or whatever it is that has caused the stress in the first place is still there. It has not gone. And then you go back to having more stress added to you. Now, the second one is, why do we spend when we are stressed? Why do we spend when we are stressed? Now, this is to tell us, I've already told us what dopamine means. It's a chemical messenger, like hormone, that sends messages to the brain and other part of the body. And so this is spending this triggers the brain to want to spend, to want to get things that you don't actually need at that point in time. And then there's also the emotional coping. You used all of those things to distract yourself from anxiety, from sadness, or loneliness, as the case may be. And then you also have the reduced self-control, where there's chronic stress impairs rational decision making. And there's also the social pressure. You have the social media influence, you have the peer comparison, and all of that. So let's quickly go to the consequences of the cycle. One is the financial impact. Because spending involves you using money, so definitely there's going to be the financial implication of it. The first one is there's what? Accumulated debt. There's overdraft, and then there's decreased savings. What you are supposed to save, you have used in spending, and then after spending, you feel relief temporarily, and then you are back to not having savings or not being able to meet up with other bills that you're supposed to pick. And then there's the long-term insecurity. Of course, when you always look at the social media, you see your friends doing this, you see your friends doing that, and you are always wanting to meet up with them. It gives you a sense of insecurity. It makes you have this low self-esteem, as the case may be. And then the second consequence of the cycle is the mental and emotional effect. Here we'll talk about the guilt or the shame or the regret after spending. I've talked about that, where you have anxiety, and then the low self-esteem. I've also talked about that. You also have the risk of developing avoidance behaviors or dependency on spending for relief. There is a risk of you developing it. Once the cycle keeps coming, and then you keep going through that cycle, you have the stress, you spend, you feel guilty, you go back to more stress. There is the possibility of you developing it. It becomes a lifestyle for you, that anytime you are stressed, the first thing you need to do is to start buying, is to start spending. You understand? So when you don't look at this cycle as a situation, then it becomes a behavior that you have developed and becomes innate in you. Stress spread through peer influence and social media interaction. It also affects school performances and relationship and friendship, as the case may be. When you are stressed, definitely, like I told us, it spreads through communities and families. And because of the aftermath of all of this stress, to talk about practical strategies that we can use to break this cycle. The first one is what? To build self-awareness. I told us when I was talking about the first part that until you are aware that that process you go through is what we call the stress spend, then you may never recover from it. And when you don't recover from it, then it becomes an habit for you that you go through. So the first thing you need to do is to build what? Self-awareness. And under self-awareness, you need to identify the emotional triggers. Identify the emotional triggers. What are those things that triggers you to go into spending? When you spend unnecessarily, when you spend when you don't need it. And then at the end of the day, you regret. At the end of the day, you are not fulfilled. You need to identify those emotional triggers. The second thing you need to do under building self-awareness is to track your spending habits. Track your spending habits. Make sure that you have like a diary or a journal where in a day, when you come in, you write down what you have spent. You look at your purse and tell yourself, oh, okay, I'm going out with 5,000 in the morning. Now I am back. How much have I spent? I remember my dad used to do this, and then I will be asking, he will write down as far as when he will buy pure water of 10 naira then, of 15 naira or 5 cup or there, but you understand, he will write it and said, oh, pure water, 5 naira, sweet, 10 naira. And then he will total everything, and then he will tell us, oh, this is how much I have spent today. This will give you an instance into what you've done so far, and then it will help you to curtail what you are going to do the following day. So we should learn to track our spending habits. Let's have a diary where we put in, our spending for that day. Look at it and ask yourself, some of these things that I have spent and that I have spent money on, do I really need it? Do I need to get this thing? If it is not necessary, then you caution yourself towards the next spending. Another thing under the building self-awareness is to operate on the 24-hour rule. What does this mean? It means that you do not purchase anything that is not essential within 24 hours. What is not essential, if it is not life-threatening, it is not compulsory, don't purchase it until after 24 hours. This is to help you that in between that 24 hours, the stress, the dopamine would have reduced in your brain. And then you'll be able to ask yourself, oh, do I really need to change my phone? Do I really need to buy these sneakers? Do I really need this face cap? Do I need to buy this pouch? Within that 24 hours. But if immediately you have that stress and then you go into spending, you would have bought all of these things, the makeup, the phone pouch, the purse, the shoes that you don't need at the end of the day. But if you can operate on this 24-hour rule, where you wait before you make purchases of non-essential commodities, then it's also going to help you. And then also practice mindful spending. Pause and ask yourself, do I need this or do I want it? Do I need this or do I want it? There's a difference between a need and a want. You need something when it is essential, but you want something out of just wanting it, out of just a desire for it, not because you need it. So if you can ask yourself this question, do I need it or do I want it? And you are able to give yourself a sincere answer truthfully, then you will see that you'll be able to break that cycle of spending under stress. The second one is stress management techniques. You can also say managing stress effectively. One is talking to a friend, where remember that our first assignment in breaking it is to identify the emotional triggers. So when you've identified these emotional triggers and you know that this thing will lead you into spending unnecessarily, then you can talk to a friend. It's a way of you to manage the stress. And so I want to advise us here that while you think you can reach out to a friend that can help you talk you out of this stress, make sure you are also a friend that somebody can call. You understand? So be a friend and also let people around you be that friend that can talk you out of stress. The second one is breathing exercises. You can go through meditation, you can go through yoga. It calms the nerves. It reduces the release of this dopamine into our brain. And then lastly, we should have adequate sleep. When we're able to have adequate sleep, we'll be able to manage stress responses, and this gives us progressive muscle relaxation. And then the third one, which is budgeting and financial planning. That is creating a healthy budget. Now, normally, because we are humans, of course, there will be some things that we just want, not because we need it. So it is allowed. Allocate a small self-care allowance for yourself. Just a small one. Just a small, out of your take home, your pocket money or whatever. Just create that. There are times you'll just be walking, strolling with your friends, and then you just see maybe this shawarma spot, maybe popcorn, maybe ice cream or something. Make sure you don't go above that your self-care allowance. It is allowed, provided it is budgeted and planned for. Another one is you set and review a budget to stay grounded in your goals. Set and review a budget. Make sure you have a budget for everything you need, to purchase. Another thing is to get a budgeting app or spreadsheet that helps us manage money. As students, I will advise us to be conversant with this Microsoft Excel. Now, if you are very conversant with Microsoft Excel as a software tool, this Microsoft Excel is a spreadsheet that with few formulations, with few formula, you can actually have your inputs and your outputs, expenditure and income. So once you put these expenses, this is the total money you have, and you spent this, it immediately calculates it and tell you how much you spent and how much you have left. So when you have this, when you use a budgeting app or this spreadsheet, it helps you to manage money. And then another thing I also want to talk about, which is quite important, I want to spend more time on, is automating savings and bill payments to reduce temptation. Automating savings and bill payments to reduce temptation. Now, I also discovered that under this automating savings and bill payment, we have so many apps. We have so many that we've talked about. And for the purpose of this platform, I'm just going to insist on only the CarryWise. Now, this is an app that can help you to save financially. It can help you to save. So when you want to be disciplined in terms of savings, go for CarryWise. When you want to have mutual funds, go for CarryWise. Now, I was able to Google them, and I discovered that of all of them, the typical returns for CarryWise is about 8 to 15% per annum, which is higher than when you look at other apps that we have around. So if you are looking for a structured mutual fund investment and wealth management tools, I think I will recommend the CarryWise. Although there are several other ones, but because of this platform that we are in, then we need to stick to the CarryWise app. And then the last one is your social connection. Social connection. How do you break the cycle using the social connection? By spending quality time with loved ones, friends, and family to reduce the stress and improve your well-being. When you bring out time to spend with loved ones instead of staying alone, instead of being isolated, instead of being bored, when you spend it with loved ones and family, it reduces the stress and improve our social and well-being. Another thing we also need to do under social connection is to detox our digital time. Detox means to reduce the time you spend, reduce the time you are exposed to advertisements, to influences on social media, reduce the time you spend with your phone. It will help you to reduce these triggers that come from the social media. And then it is also advisable that you replace all of this spending with positive activities. What are these positive activities? You like walking, you can call a friend, you like skipping, you like drawing, you like singing. Whenever you see those triggers that comes in, like I told you, which is the first thing, you build self-awareness, you're already aware that once this thing comes in, you are going into this stress spending. Then you engage yourself with all of these positive activities that can take your mind off all of this spending, all of this impulsive spending. So here on my slide, I have some quick tools and resources for us. When you want to do budgeting, you can use the Mint, you can use the YNAB, you need the budget and all that. When you want to go for mindfulness, you go for Airspace, you go for Midfit. These are tools that can actually help you in breaking this cycle. And then I also recommend some books for us in case we want to read. We have The Cycle of Stress. We have Effects of Stress on Mental Health, written by Rangel et al. 2022. We have Stress Management Through Mind Engineering, and all of these are wonderful books that we can actually Google and get some reactions from. I actually think that my time is almost up, but let me round off with this final thought. Now, my final thought is that stress is part of life. It's inevitable. And we also need to acknowledge that this stress spend cycle is real and harmful. But with awareness and proactive strategies, we can actually break it. And this will help us to foster better mental and financial health. But how you respond make all the difference. You break the cycle through awareness, through support, and self-care. So now, before I give my final thank you, do we have any questions and answer?
Okay, thank you very much, Mal, for that insightful speech you gave us. We really learned a lot. Now, I would like to ask, can stress spending also be something psychological? Maybe in a way that it has gone beyond self medication or something you can get back to normal on your own. Is there a situation where that kind of incident can happen?
Refers to a state of mind where a person is able to cope with the normal phases of life. If you want to say somebody is mentally stable, then you need to look at the emotional, the social, and financial stability of that person. Having looked at that, I also told us that we need to also look at those things that triggers us, that give us that stress spent habit. And then under it, I told us that we need to be conscious. We need to be emotionally balanced. We need to be resilient. We need to have self acceptance. You have to feel good about yourself, even with your flaws or imperfections. You need to reduce your time on the social media, reduce your exposure to the social media. When you do this, all of these social media influences, peer comparison will be reduced. And I gave us a cycle. I told us that a cycle means there is no beginning, there is no end. When you have a cycle, you don't know where it's starting or it's ending from. And so when you are stressed, you go into spending, and then after spending, there is a temporary relief of what you've acquired or what you've bought at that particular point in time. And after that brief relief, this temporary relief, you go into guilt. You ask yourself, why did I buy this? Do I really need this? Do I really need that? Why did I do this? Why did I do that? Why did I go to this place? Why did, and all of that. And then at the end of it, when you are sitting down, you now ask yourself all of these questions, which eventually adds to the stress that you have already. So we really need to ensure that we don't go through this cycle over and over again, because we end up at the same point where we started from. And then breaking the cycle, which I told us is the most important thing, by which helps us to improve our mental well-being. The first one is to build self-awareness. Identify those emotional triggers. Know yourself that these are the things that make me spend or make me overspend. When you do this, get a diary and start writing your daily spending on it. And then I told us that we should also inhabit this habit of waiting after 24 hours before we purchase anything that is not an emergency, that is not essential. Just wait after 24 hours. And then after 24 hours, you can now ask yourself, do I need this or do I want it? So if you can give yourself a sincere answer, you will know whether you should continue with that purchase or not. Secondly, is to manage stress effectively. And I told us that we can talk to a friend. And then I also encourage those that while you want to have somebody as a friend that you can talk to, make sure you are also a friend that somebody can talk to. Because this stress triggers is inevitable, it is everywhere. So you feeling it does not mean someone else is not feeling it. So when you want to run to somebody to talk to, make sure you are also a friend that they can talk to. Make sure you have a listening ear. I told us that we can also exercise. We can take a breathing exercise, the yoga, the meditation. We should have adequate sleep. So when we do this, we are able to manage stress, and it gives us a progressive muscle relaxation. Another one I told us is to create a healthy budget. Create a healthy budget. Allocate a small fund for yourself, a self-care allowance. Just sometimes, just indulge yourself, but make sure that it is budgeted so that you don't overspend, you don't overindulge yourself, or you don't overgive yourself this self-care allowance they are talking about. Use budgeting apps, use spreadsheets, get familiar with the Excel. This gives you an easy way. Once you put in your figure with the formula already imputed, it gives you your expenses for the day. It helps you to know what you have left in your account. And then I told us, under creating a healthy budget, is having automated savings. Automated savings. This cannot be overemphasized. Using this Wise as a point of contact. I told us that for savings, it is automated. You give the app the instruction that once this money is there, you don't touch it. You fixed it, you lock it up. So even when you want to spend, you don't have access to the fund. So that helps you to save. Are we together? It helps you to save. It gives you this mutual fund. And then I told us that even while you are saving, you are not just saving. Their returns per annum is also something that is what that is encouraged or viable. I told us they have, I think as of yesterday when I researched, they have about 8 to 15%, increase. That's the return they give you per time. So all of these features are things that can help you to have automated savings and bill payments. You already know your bills you have to pay per month. You know the ones you pay weekly. Your data, internet, how do people call it? Your subscription per month. So that even when you exceed your subscription, you don't overdo it because you spend most of the time on the social media where you be influenced negatively. You see your friends, they show off with this, they show off with that, you want it. Or you can also see all of these social media influencer. They just finished this AMVCA, and then you see all the dressings, and you ask yourself, oh, when am I going to get this? All the ladies are stashed, all this jewelry, this hair, you will also want to get it. But don't forget that all of these people you are seeing on social media, they don't actually have all of those things. Most of them are influencing for a brand. And after the show, they return. But you have used your money to buy and keep, and then it becomes useless because you won't be able to use it another time. So when you are able to do all of this, you'll be able to improve our mental well-being, which is basically what we've talked about this evening. So thank you very much for listening, and I appreciate the leadership one more time for giving me this opportunity to speak to you on this forum. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you, ma. Thank you, ma.
Thank you so much, Ma. We really, really enjoyed today's section. And I know that a lot of us who paid attention we enjoy what you have just told us. Please, if you're joining us for the first time, this is how we Carry Wise Class of Tech students go about our seminars, where we teach and encourage students to be financially to gain financial literacy and to improve their career development and networking. I'll also invite you for our next section where we're going to be talking about the 5 unbreakable laws of money. That's going to hold on June 7th. So if you are interested in keeping up with us or knowing when that seminar is going to hold or how it's going to hold, I'll advise you to link up with one of our ambassadors. If you're familiar with Sanusi, you can meet with Sanusi. Sanusi will give you the link of the general group where you can be added and you get immediate feedback on how to go about the CarryWise app or how to go about the seminar or any workshop that we have in place. Thank you very much again for joining us. And Mrs. Victor, thank you. Victoria, I'm sorry. Thank you very much for giving us this insightful discussion today on stress and um, money.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, then I think we're done for today. Like I said earlier, if you need more information on how we CarryWise ambassadors do our stuff, you can meet with any CarryWise ambassador that you know. If you're familiar with Sanusi, you can meet with him or me. If you know me, you can also meet with me or Fito or Jewel or Queen or Omodolakwa is here too. So a lot of us are here, so you can just link up with us. I'm seeing some new faces who are now ambassadors. I'm seeing Esther. I'm seeing Philip. I'm seeing Hakira. I'm seeing Samuel. I'm seeing Bolu. I don't know. I'm saying Ibrahim, but I'm not sure if it's our Ibrahim or another
My
Ibrahim.
Ibrahim. Oh.
Okay. I couldn't see your
Bully
profile.
prefer. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So that will be all, and we'll be glad to invite you for our next seminar called The Five Unbreakable Laws of Money, where we're going to have a different guest speaker. And trust us, it's going to be very, very interesting and very, very educational. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much for joining us today. So we can now leave the call.